Hi, my name is Jordan Esquivel. I'll be sharing about the kinetic chain of the forearm Frisbee throw. This is a common throw in Ultimate Frisbee and one that is claimed to be most difficult by many players. So if you're a beginner, don't take this throw too seriously. It takes some time to get used to. What I find most fascinating about this throw is that it has a long distance of clearance from such a small snap in the wrist. So let's take a look at the arm and we'll hit 3 major points. Here's an anterior view of a flexed arm, and shortly you'll see a posterior view of a flexed arm. And the 3 joints that we'll be focusing on is the elbow, wrist, and interphalangeal joints. Here are 2 slowed down versions of the forearm throw. And something that helped me understand the movement of a human body is this idea of levers. How muscles influence the bones to move in a specific direction, and there's a shortening and lengthening of muscles. So we'll be analyzing that now, beginning with the wind-up. Here's a stiff frame of the wind-up, and the first thing that we'll take a look at in the wind-up is the elbow joint. Now the elbow joint is flexed. The bicep brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis, and pronator teres are in a concentric contraction, and this causes flexion of the elbow. Now as we look further, we'll look at the wrist. In the forehand throw, the wrist is where all the action happens, and to begin studying this, we'll look at extension, radiodeviation. The muscles that contribute to wrist extension are extensor carpi radialis, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, and these muscles are in a concentric contraction. The next motion is radiodeviation, which is extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis, and these muscles are acting in a concentric motion. And now we're going to take a look at the interphalangeal joints, and here is an anterior view, and here is a posterior view of the phalanges. The type of grip I feel is important to mention. It is a 3-prong chuck or 3-jaw grip. This is a grip, so it's done in an isometric contraction, and the muscles that influence this contraction are the flexor pollicis longus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and flexor digitorum profundus. Now here's a slow motion of the wind-up phase, and as we can see on the lateral side of the arm, that these muscles are activated to get us into our next phase, acceleration. Acceleration is a phase that's kind of hard to capture because in between it's very fast. So here's a still motion for you. The elbow joint is in an extension movement, which is influenced by the tricep brachii and aconius, which are in a concentric contraction. Now I move on from the elbow to the wrist, which has 2 types of motions, ulnar deviation and flexion. 2 muscles contribute to ulnar deviation, extensor carpi ulnaris and flexor carpi ulnaris, and they are in a concentric contraction. Flexion at the wrist is happening also, and muscles that contribute to flexion at the wrist are palmaris longus, flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, and they are in a concentric contraction. Now for our last joint, the interphalangeal joint, which remains the same, is a flexed position and an isometric contraction with the same muscles. The acceleration phase is where everything begins to change. The posterior side of the arm is activated, and the medial side of the forearm is activated, and then the interphalangeals, well, they remain the same, but everything up the chain begins to change, so that way the motion of the arm is a fluid motion forward and allowing there to be a build of force. Once that force is released, now we go into deceleration. Deceleration can be viewed as the brakes, and what that means is that the arm is still extending, and as we look at the elbow, but the muscles that cause extension in the arm are not activated. Rather, the muscles of the flexion of the arm are activated. So that means the bicep brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis, and pronator teres. And these are in an eccentric motion. And now look at the wrist, which is still flexing, but the muscles that are contributing to this are extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, which are all in an eccentric contraction to slow down the flexion of the wrist. Now for ulnar deviation, extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis are activated in order to slow down the ulnar deviation and keep it in control motion. I look at the interphalangeal joints, which is now extending, which means they have concentric contracted, and that is the flexor pollicis longus, extensor indicus, extensor pollicis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, extensor digitum minimum, and extensor digitorum. So now we have to complete the deceleration phase, and we can look at the whole picture. Putting together everything in this video, we can see that a small amount of muscle shortening is needed to gain a rotational movement around a joint axis, thus producing a range of motion and speed. The movement in these joints created by the tension of the muscles creates this awesome distant throw called the forehand throw. Winograd and Ingsberg support the forehand throw as something that people should quickly learn and pick up on, and I would agree, because as you see that this is an effective throw. Although I have to admit that this throw does take some time to learn, so you gotta take it easy and slow, because you could really hurt your wrists. How you can prevent from hurting your wrist is by doing wrist exercises, and yeah, just continuously going out to practice. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the Frisbee.